There's no advertising or sponsorship on this show, but if you enjoy listening to it and would like to show your support by, say, buying me a coffee, please head on over to 5minutebiographies.com/coffee to see how.
Welcome to the 5 Minute Biographies podcast, where every week we tell you interesting things about interesting people in about 5 minutes. And now here is your host, Wayne Armstrong.
Hi guys, welcome to the 5 Minute Biographies podcast. Before we get started, I just want to let you know about a couple of things. The first is that this is the last episode of Season 6 of 5 Minute Biographies, but don't worry though, I'll be back with 10 new episodes starting on the 7th of March. In the meantime though, I've decided to breathe life back into my other podcast, which I started at the same time as 5 Minute Biographies. It's called 5 Minute History, and over the course of 10 episodes of what will effectively be Season 2, we'll be looking at things as diverse as the history of the submarine, the history of chocolate, and the history of the Football World Cup. So I hope you'll join me for that, starting next week. But for now, let's get on with Season 6, Episode 10 of the 5 Minute Biographies podcast, David Bowie. David Bowie was an actor, songwriter, singer and master of the stage. But more than any of these things, the thing that set him apart from all others was his deep and abiding love of innovation in his music, and it was these innovations that do and will continue to carry on long after his passing. Born David Robert Jones on the 8th of January 1947 in Brixton, South London, David Bowie began to get in touch with his musical talents as a young child. He went on to study both music and art during his higher education years, which eventually led him to choose music as a professional career in 1963. For anyone who has ever struggled in music or art, you should know that even David Bowie took 6 years between when he began his professional career in '63 and when he had his first major hit, Space Oddity, in 1969. It became the first of his entries in the UK singles charts, but it would not be his last, as his career, which spanned 5 decades, would include multiple awards, as well as continue the innovation of music that he began as a young man. Always the artist as well as the musician, David Bowie experimented for the next 3 years between the success of his album in 1969 and his re-emergence in 1972 with his wildly popular The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, which for many people was their first introduction to the music they would love for the rest of their lives. At around the same time, on the 19th of March 1970, David married Mary Angela Barnett at the Bromley Registry Office. They had a son called Duncan who was born on the 30th of May 1971. Although he would later describe himself as a closet heterosexual, it is at around this time that Bowie began to also experiment with his sexuality, declaring himself gay in an interview with Melody Maker in 1972 and bisexual in an interview with Playboy magazine in 1976. David and Angela would be together for a decade and ultimately divorced in 1980. Not content with being a one-hit wonder, David Bowie went on another period of experimentation before he totally shifted his musical genre to something he referred to as plastic soul. In 1975 he released a brand new album which utilised this new style of music that he was creating. At first the radical shift in style went down poorly with some of his earlier fans. However, it did lead to his first major success in the United States with the hit song Fame on his Young Americans album. Having studied art as well as music and learning the craft of showmanship from his years of professional work, Bowie went on to add acting to his career as well. He starred in his first film, the cult classic The Man Who Fell to Earth in 1976, and as if a professional musician starring in a cult movie wasn't enough to continue to garner scrutiny from both critics and fans, David would then emerge again in 1977 with a shifted style in his album Low, which had a strong electronic feel to it. Like all great artists, Bowie knew that true success was not about riding on your achievements and coasting from one to the next until eventually they peter out. He did what he did for his love of music and innovation, and because of this particular love of innovation, Bowie continued to reinvent himself over the decades as an actor and as a musical innovator, often changing styles to stay current with the times instead of trying to produce music solely for an earlier era. Some of these changes met with major success, while others met with mixed and uneven reception, as was the case in his career throughout the end of the 1970s. Not one to be daunted by mixed results or even negative reception, Bowie went on to win another #1 UK top spot with his single Ashes to Ashes. The extraordinary success of this song helped to massively boost the sales of his correlating album, Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, as well as Under Pressure in 1981. Despite years of reinvention and innovation, all artists finally hit their zenith. For David Bowie, this success came in the early 1980s and would never be truly repeated for the rest of his life, although he would go on to win many awards for his service to the music industry and for his songs themselves. David Bowie's last major musical flair came in 1983 with Let's Dance. This particular song topped the charts both in the UK and in the United States, where Bowie had gained considerable popularity since the release of his album Young Americans. In 1992, on the 24th of April, David Bowie married again, this time to the model Iman. This marriage would last until Bowie's death and produced a daughter called Alexandria, who was born in August 2000. For the remainder of the 80s, 90s and early 2000s, David Bowie never achieved his earlier success, although he did continue to add to his musical innovations as well as starring in major movies such as The Prestige, The Last Temptation of Christ, Labyrinth and Merry Christmas Mr. Lawrence, and playing important roles in these movies bolstered his earlier love of drama. Retiring permanently from public life, with one last live performance in 2006, David Bowie then spent the next 10 years in quiet retirement, spending time with his family, but also continuing to make music. In 2014, and unknown to anyone but those closest to him, he was diagnosed with liver cancer. He continued to work up until the end, and his final album was released on his 69th birthday. 2 days later, on the 10th of January 2016, David Bowie died. Although he spent many years retired, his achievements in music cannot be overstated. He sold over 140 million albums and had 11 #1 hits, with 5 of his albums going platinum in the United States and 9 of them going platinum in the UK. He won an Ivor Novello Award for Space Oddity and a Saturn Award for his performance in The Man Who Fell to Earth. He won 6 Grammy Awards and 4 Brit Awards. He was offered but turned down both an OBE and a knighthood, saying that he didn't really know what they were for. He has a place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and in 2016, Rolling Stone magazine proclaimed him the greatest rock star ever. I hope you enjoyed that episode of 5 Minute Biographies. If you did, why not say thanks by buying me a coffee? Head on over to 5minutebiographies.com/coffee to see how.
Thanks for listening to the 5 Minute Biographies podcast at www.5minutebiographies.com.